Have you ever wondered what would happen if someone you hurt came back into your life? Not for revenge, but to show you who you could have been. Well, buckle up, because the story I'm about to tell you will have you questioning everything you think you know about second chances, wealth, and the power of facing your own truth. If you haven't subscribed to this channel yet, you're going to want to do that right now. Trust me, these are the kinds of stories that make you rethink your entire perspective on life, and you're not going to want to miss the next one. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. This is the real story of Marcus Webb. And what happened to him at the Meridian Gala changed everything. Marcus Webb was 40 years old, and he'd managed to accomplish absolutely nothing worth mentioning. That's what he told himself most mornings as he stared at the water-stained ceiling of his apartment and wondered how his life had become such a complete and utter disaster. At 40, he should have been established, successful, maybe even wealthy. Instead, he was living paycheck to paycheck in a one-bedroom apartment that smelled like stale coffee and regret, working a dead-end job at an electronics store where kids half his age acted like his supervisor. He'd wake up, drag himself to work, pretend to care about selling extended warranties to people who didn't need them, then come home to drink cheap beer and watch television until he passed out. Rinse and repeat. That was the Marcus Webb story in 2024. But it wasn't always this way. 20 years ago, Marcus had been somebody. He'd had ambition, a beautiful wife, dreams of building an empire. The wife's name was Elena, and she was extraordinary. Not just beautiful, though she was that too. Elena was brilliant. She had a business degree from one of the top universities in the country, and she was building something real. While other people her age were still trying to figure out what they wanted to do with their lives, Elena was already making it happen. They'd met at a networking event of all places. Marcus had gone there pretending to have business opportunities he didn't actually have. Elena had gone there with actual business opportunities and genuine excitement about the future. She'd been giving a presentation on a startup idea she was developing, and Marcus had been genuinely impressed. More than impressed. He'd been mesmerized. He'd asked her out after her presentation, fully expecting her to say no to someone like him, someone with more ambition than actual accomplishment. But she'd said yes. And for a year, they'd dated. For 3 years, they'd been married. And for all of those years, Marcus had been terrified. Not of Elena, of being found out. Because the truth was, Marcus didn't have anything. No trust fund, no family wealth, no successful business ventures. He had a high school diploma, decent looks, and an impressive ability to talk his way into situations. He'd used that ability to convince Elena that he was working on several promising business deals. In reality, he was working as a mid-level sales associate at a telecommunications company, barely making enough to keep up with the lifestyle Elena's success had afforded them. And Elena, being brilliant but also being in love, believed in him. She thought that Marcus was building something big and that eventually they'd be partners in a powerful business empire. She invested her energy and her optimism in him. She encouraged him to pursue his ideas. She supported him emotionally when deals didn't come through. She did everything right. But Marcus did everything wrong. The decline started subtly. A missed opportunity here, a failed investment there. Then came the drinking, just a little more than he used to, just enough to take the edge off his anxiety about being discovered as a fraud. Then came the arguments. Elena would point out inconsistencies in his stories. He'd get defensive. She'd try to help, and he'd push her away, accusing her of not believing in him. The truth was, she believed in him too much. If she could have just doubted him, just accused him of being a failure, it would have been easier somehow. But she didn't. She kept trying. She kept believing. She kept loving him even as he was destroying everything. The end came quietly, the way big things sometimes do. Elena had come home from a meeting with a venture capitalist who was interested in funding one of her new projects. She was excited, glowing, already imagining what they could build together. She turned to Marcus and said, "I want you to come to the meeting tomorrow. I want you to be part of this." And Marcus had snapped. He'd started yelling. He'd accused her of not believing in him, of thinking she was better than him, of trying to show him up. He'd said terrible things. Things designed to hurt because he was so terrified of her seeing the truth. That he was a failure. that he'd never build anything, that he was dragging her down. Elena had listened to all of it with tears in her eyes. And then she'd gone upstairs, packed a suitcase, and left. That was 3 years ago. 3 years since the woman who'd believed in him had decided that believing in him was exhausting, and she had to believe in herself first. The years that followed had been rough. Elena had filed for divorce. She'd taken her business ventures and built something massive. Marcus had watched from afar, through social media, through mutual acquaintances, as she became increasingly successful. While he was stuck in his dead-end job, Elena was launching companies, winning awards, building wealth. The success made it easier to hate her, which made it easier to live with himself. Until the invitation arrived. It came in a cream-colored envelope with his name written in elegant gold lettering. Inside was an invitation to the Meridian Gala, an evening of elegance and philanthropy. It was happening at the Grandview Hotel, the most prestigious venue in the city, and on the back was a handwritten note. Marcus, I'd like you to attend as my guest. I have something I want to show you. It's important. Elena. Marcus had held that invitation for 3 days before opening it. His first instinct was to throw it away. His second instinct was to laugh it off. What could Elena possibly want with him? They had nothing left to say to each other. The divorce was finalized. She'd moved on. He'd definitely moved on. Moving on meant occasionally checking her social media accounts at 2 a.m. and wondering what his life would look like if he hadn't been such a colossal failure. But on the third day, curiosity won out. And so did something else. A desperate need to prove to himself that he could still stand in a room with Elena without falling apart. That he could pretend, even just for an evening, that his life had gone somewhere. That he wasn't still stuck in the same depressing pattern of failure and mediocrity. He decided to go. The Grandview Hotel was everything Marcus remembered. Glittering, expensive, intimidating. Just walking through the lobby made him feel poor. The people around him wore designer clothes and carried themselves with the ease of those who'd never doubted they belonged in spaces like this. Marcus had rented his tuxedo from a shop downtown for $150 he couldn't really afford. He'd practiced in the mirror for hours, preparing anecdotes about his various business ventures and his recent opportunities in the tech sector. The tech sector story was particularly good, vague enough to seem plausible, impressive enough to make him sound successful, complicated enough that people would probably stop asking questions. He'd also spent the afternoon at a bar, which wasn't exactly the best decision-making process, but it had taken the edge off his anxiety. Just enough alcohol to make him feel brave. Not enough that people would notice. He'd done this calculation 1,000 times over the past 3 years. It was a science by now. As he made his way toward the ballroom, Marcus felt his heart rate increasing. He was about to see Elena for the first time in 3 years. What if she looked even more successful? What if she was with someone? What if she took one look at him and remembered exactly why she'd left? The ballroom was spectacular. Massive chandeliers hung from a 20-foot ceiling. Round tables were arranged throughout the space, each one set with fine china, crystal glasses, and elaborate floral arrangements. A live orchestra played soft classical music from a platform at the far end. Wait staff in white gloves circulated with trays of expensive champagne and hors d'oeuvres. Everything screamed wealth and success and accomplishment. It screamed everything Marcus didn't have. That's when he saw her. Elena stood near the main entrance to the ballroom, and for a moment, Marcus literally couldn't breathe. She was wearing a stunning emerald gown that fell to her ankles with an elegance that made every other woman in the room fade into the background. Her dark hair was styled in an elaborate updo with strands of small diamonds woven through it. She wore a necklace that looked like it probably cost more than Marcus's annual salary. But it wasn't the dress or the jewelry that caught Marcus off guard. It was how alive she looked, how confident, how utterly and completely herself. There was a lightness to her, an ease, that hadn't been there when they were married. The tension that had always characterized her, the slight worry lines that used to appear when she thought about money or the future. All of it was gone. She was surrounded by important-looking people, all of them hanging on her every word. A distinguished man with silver hair had his hand on her arm. Elena was laughing at something someone had said, and the sound of her laugh, genuine, unguarded. Hit Marcus like a physical blow. Was he the silver-haired guy? Had she moved on to someone like him? Someone successful and accomplished and everything Marcus wasn't? And then Elena turned. Her eyes scanned the room, and for a second, Marcus thought she was looking at him. But she was looking past him, looking for someone else, until her gaze suddenly sharpened, and she saw him. Recognition flashed across her face, then surprise, then something more complicated, something Marcus couldn't quite read. Pity? Sadness? Judgment? She excused herself from the group and began moving toward him through the crowd. "Marcus," she said when she reached him, and he was struck by how her voice had changed. It was deeper, more confident, more commanding than he remembered. "You came." "Yeah, well," Marcus said, forcing a smile that he hoped looked natural. "Couldn't miss an invitation from my ex-wife, right? Besides, I've been meaning to check out this place. I've got a few business associates who've mentioned the Grandview as a potential venue for some of our corporate events. Thought I'd scope it out, see if it's up to our standards." He watched her face for signs of impression. Instead, he saw something that looked like disappointment. "You look well," she said, studying him with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. "How have you been? Really, I mean, not the highlight reel version." "I'm great," he said quickly. "Business is booming, actually. I was in negotiations on a major deal when I got your invitation. Incredible timing, really. Sometimes the universe just aligns. You know?" Elena continued to study his face. "You're still doing it," she said softly. "Doing what?" "Pretending. Making up stories. Trying to impress me with things you think I want to hear instead of just being honest." Marcus felt a flash of anger. "I'm not pretending. I'm doing fine." "Your shoes are from a discount outlet," Elena said gently. "The suit was rented. I can tell by the way it fits. And you smell like whiskey. So no, Marcus, you're not doing fine. You're the same as you were 3 years ago. And it's breaking my heart because you have so much potential and you're wasting it on this." She gestured vaguely at him. At his pretense, his lies, his desperation to appear successful. Marcus felt his defensive walls slam into place. "I think you've got me confused with someone who cares what you think about me." "I know you care," Elena said, and the sadness in her eyes made the anger drain right out of him. "That's why I invited you here. I want to show you something. I want you to see what I've been building. I want you to understand that there's another way to live your life. But I need you to be willing to see it." "Another way?" Marcus asked skeptically. "What, are you going to tell me the secret to success? Are you going to give me a pep talk about believing in myself?" "Save it, Elena. I've heard it all before. And clearly, it doesn't work for me." "That's not what I'm offering," Elena said. She took his arm gently. "Come with me. Let me show you." Marcus wanted to pull away. He wanted to walk out of this ballroom and never see Elena again. He wanted to go home and drink himself into oblivion. But something in her voice, a gentleness, a genuine concern, made him follow her anyway. Elena led him through a corridor lined with photographs and away from the main ballroom. They ended up in a quiet lounge with comfortable seating and soft lighting. She gestured for him to sit, and they settled onto opposite ends of a cream-colored sofa. "I organized this gala," Elena began. "I've been organizing galas and philanthropic events for the past 3 years, and they've raised over $50 million. Marcus blinked. $50 million? For what? "For a foundation I started. It's called the Meridian Foundation, and its mission is to help people who are struggling. People dealing with financial hardship, addiction, broken families, damaged self-esteem. People who feel like failures and don't know how to climb back out." She paused, and her eyes got a distant look. "It was inspired by someone," she continued. "Someone I loved very much. Someone who had so much potential but was so afraid of being seen as a failure that he created an entire world of lies instead of facing his fears. He pushed away everyone who cared about him, including me, and it cost him everything." Marcus knew she was talking about him, but the way she said it, without anger, without judgment, just with sadness and compassion, made it somehow worse. I spent years being angry at that person, Elena continued. I told myself that his problems were his own fault, that I couldn't have done anything differently, that I was better off without him. And in some ways that was true. But over time, I realized that my anger was coming from a place of hurt. I felt rejected because I couldn't fix him. I felt like I'd failed as a wife because he wouldn't let me help him. She leaned forward. But eventually, I realized that my feelings weren't about him. They were about me, and I channeled them into something productive. I started asking myself, what if there were other people like him? What if there were thousands of people feeling exactly what he felt? Terrified, ashamed, desperate to appear successful while falling apart on the inside. What if I could help them? That's really noble, Marcus said, and he meant it. But there was a bitterness in his voice that he couldn't quite hide. It's selfish, actually, Elena said with a small smile. I did it because it helped me heal. The foundation helps other people, which is great. But I started it because I needed to transform my pain into something meaningful. She reached over and placed her hand on his arm. I invited you here because I wanted to show you that there is another way. I wanted you to see that people like you, and I say people like you with nothing but compassion, people who are struggling can get help. Real help. Not judgment. Not pity. But actual tools and support and community to rebuild their lives. Marcus felt something crack open inside him. A small, carefully guarded part that had been waiting for permission to fall apart. What if I don't want to rebuild? He asked quietly. What if I'm too far gone? You're not, Elena said firmly. Marcus, I've worked with hundreds of people over the past 3 years. I've met people who've hit rock bottom so hard that they thought they were dead. People who'd lost everything. Their families, their homes, their self-respect. And you know what? Most of them rebuilt their lives. Not back to what they used to be, but into something better. Something more authentic. Because the person they rebuilt themselves into was based on truth instead of lies. Before Marcus could respond, his phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out and saw a message from his landlord. Final notice. Rent due tomorrow or eviction begins Monday. You have 24 hours. The timing was almost absurdly perfect. Here he was, sitting across from his ex-wife, who was offering him help, and his landlord was threatening to throw him out onto the street. The universe wasn't being subtle. I have to go, Elena said, standing up. I need to get back to the guests. But I want you to stay. I want you to experience this evening. There are people here. Scientists, entrepreneurs, social workers, artists. All of them doing incredible work through the foundation. I want you to talk to them. I want you to see what's possible when you stop running from your problems and start facing them. She walked to the door, then paused. And Marcus, the man who's coming tonight, he's not here to judge you. He's not going to be impressed by your stories. He's going to be impressed if you show him your truth. That's what actually matters. After she left, Marcus sat alone in the lounge, feeling completely exposed and vulnerable. His carefully constructed facade had crumbled in front of the one person he'd been trying to impress. The woman he'd spent 3 years convincing himself he didn't care about had just offered him help without asking for anything in return except honesty. Terrified him. But it also gave him something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. Marcus returned to the ballroom, and what he found there shocked him. Instead of the sea of snobbish rich people he'd been expecting, he found a room full of individuals who seemed genuinely interested in making a difference. He found himself drawn into conversations with people working on everything from addiction recovery programs to housing initiatives to vocational training. There was Dr. Patricia Williams, who ran a recovery program for people dealing with substance abuse. She asked Marcus about his drinking with a matter-of-factness that wasn't judgmental, just curious. "How much are you drinking?" she asked. Instead of lying, Marcus found himself telling her the truth. "Too much. Every night, pretty much. Just enough to make me not think about how much of a failure I am." "That's more self-aware than most people in your situation," Patricia said. "Do you want to change it?" "I don't know," Marcus admitted. "Maybe. Well, when you know for sure, we have a program. It's comprehensive. Therapy, medical support, peer community, job training if you want it. It works if you work it. He also met James Morrison, a therapist who worked with people rebuilding their identities after personal crises. The thing about shame, James told him, is that it feeds on secrecy. The moment you tell someone the truth about who you are and what you've been through, the shame loses some of its power. It doesn't disappear, but it stops having complete control over you. And there was Keisha Johnson, who ran a job training program. "What do you do?" she asked. "I work in retail," Marcus said, "selling electronics. It's not great. Would you rather do something else?" "Honestly, I don't know. I never really learned any actual skills. I just learned how to talk people into things." "Talking people into things is actually a valuable skill," Keisha said. "We could channel that into sales, management, leadership. There are paths for people like you. You just have to be willing to do the work." By the time dinner was served, Marcus was seated at a table with several foundation board members and staff. The conversation was intelligent, engaged, and surprisingly welcoming. When someone asked what he did, instead of launching into his usual fabrications, he told the truth. "I work in retail. It's been challenging, and I haven't really figured out what I want to do next. I'm kind of stuck." The response was encouraging rather than dismissive. No one made him feel bad about it. Instead, they offered genuine advice, resources, and support. It was the first time in years that Marcus had felt like he could breathe. Then the lights dimmed, and Elena took the stage. The room fell silent. Elena stood at the microphone with a presence that commanded the room's complete attention. "Thank you all for coming," she began. "Thank you for your generous donations and your commitment to the Foundation's mission. Tonight, I want to talk about why this work matters so deeply to me." The screen behind her flicked to life, showing photographs. At first, they were beautiful images of the city, of philanthropic achievements, of smiling faces. But then the images changed, and Marcus's heart stopped. They were photographs from his marriage to Elena, the two of them on their honeymoon in Hawaii, young and hopeful and so in love. Elena at her college graduation with Marcus standing beside her. The two of them at his company's holiday party, dressed up and happy. Pictures from a life that felt like it belonged to someone else. "This is my ex-husband, Marcus," Elena said, and Marcus felt every single eye in the room turn toward him. He wanted to disappear. He wanted to run. He wanted to do anything except sit there and be exposed like this. "I married him because I loved him," Elena continued. "I believed in him. I thought we would build something beautiful together." She paused, and her voice grew thick with emotion. "But life is complicated. We struggled. He struggled. I struggled. We made mistakes, both of us. Eventually, I made the difficult decision to leave because I realized that I couldn't fix his problems for him, and he wasn't ready to fix them himself. For years after that, I was angry about it. I felt rejected. I felt like I'd wasted time. I felt like I'd failed as a wife." She took a breath, and a tear rolled down her cheek. "But that's where I was wrong. My responsibility wasn't to fix him. My responsibility was to take care of myself and to honor the lessons that difficult period taught me." Elena looked directly at Marcus. "One of those lessons was this. There are so many people in this world who are struggling exactly the way Marcus was struggling. People who are terrified of being seen as failures, so they create elaborate lies instead of facing their fears. People who are drowning in shame and addiction and self-doubt, but who are completely unaware that help exists. People who think they're too far gone to ever come back." She turned to address the room again. "That's why the Meridian Foundation exists. It exists because I want to give people what I couldn't give Marcus when we were together because he wasn't ready, but what I can give to others now. It exists to tell people that rock bottom isn't the end of your story. It's just a turning point." Elena smiled sadly. "I invited Marcus here tonight to see that turning point in action, to understand that his life doesn't have to end the way he's been living it, that there's another path, and all he has to do is be brave enough to take it." The room erupted in applause. Cameras flashed. People turned to look at Marcus with expressions of sympathy and encouragement. And Marcus felt something break open inside him, not in a bad way, but in a way that cracked through all of his carefully constructed defenses. His ex-wife had just told the city's most influential people that he was her ex-husband, that he was struggling, that he was the inspiration for her entire foundation. It should have been completely humiliating. It should have felt like revenge, like punishment, like exposure. Instead, it felt like grace. After Elena came down from the stage, she worked the room, greeting donors and celebrating successes. But she eventually made her way back to Marcus's table. She looked at him with a question in her eyes. "I'm sorry," she said immediately. "I should have asked permission first. But I needed to be honest with everyone about what this foundation means to me." Marcus stood up. Around them, people were watching, curious about this public reunion between the woman who'd just given a powerful speech and the man she'd called out on stage. "Don't apologize," he said quietly. "You told the truth. I'm tired of lies, Elena. I'm tired of pretending. You're right. I'm stuck. And I'm drowning. And I don't know how to get out by myself." He paused, then continued, "I want your help. Not because I think it'll get us back together or because I'm trying to impress you. I want it because I'm finally ready to face what I've been running from. And I don't think I can do it alone." Relief and hope flashed across Elena's face. "Then let me introduce you to some people." Over the next hour, Elena introduced Marcus to various people working with the foundation. She walked him through the training programs, the support systems, the counseling options. She explained how the foundation worked. They provided comprehensive support for individuals willing to do the work to rebuild their lives. "It's not magic," she explained. "It's hard. It requires honesty, dedication, and a willingness to feel things you probably don't want to feel. But it works." They ended up back in the quiet lounge where they'd talked earlier. "If I do this," Marcus said slowly, "if I go through your program and actually rebuild my life, what happens then? Do we?" Elena shook her head gently. "Marcus, this has to be about you. Not about us. Not about trying to win me back or prove something to me. This has to be about you becoming the person you're capable of being. For your own sake." "But what if I become that person and it's too late?" "Then at least you'll be that person," Elena said. "And that's worth something." She stood up. "I need to get back out there. But I want you to think about this. Really think about it. Because this is a choice you have to make for yourself, not for anyone else." Marcus stayed at the gala until nearly midnight. He spoke with more staff members. He filled out preliminary paperwork. He felt the weight of expectation and possibility settling on his shoulders. By the time he left, he had 3 phone numbers, a stack of brochures, and something he hadn't felt in years: the possibility that his life could be different. When he got home to his apartment, he found an eviction notice taped to his door. Tomorrow, his landlord had said. 24 hours. Marcus looked at the notice, then at the stack of materials from the foundation, then at his reflection in the darkened television screen. He looked like a man who'd been beaten down by life, like a man who'd run out of options, like a man with nothing left to lose. And for the first time in years, he didn't reach for a bottle. Instead, he picked up his phone and called the number Dr. Patricia Williams had given him. "I want to enroll in your program," he said when she answered. "I'm ready." The first 3 months were the hardest. Marcus was required to attend daily group therapy sessions, individual counseling, and medical assessments. He had to get completely sober, not just cut back on drinking, but completely eliminate it. He had to face things about himself that he'd been avoiding for years. In group therapy, he met people who were also rebuilding their lives. Some of them had been homeless. Some of them had lost custody of their children. Some of them had spent time in jail. And all of them had the same story. They'd been running from the truth about themselves until they couldn't run anymore. One man, named David, had been a successful lawyer who'd lost everything to gambling addiction. "The thing is," David said one day in group, "I thought I was so smart. I thought I could outsmart my problems, just like I'd outsmart legal opponents. But you can't logic your way out of an addiction or a character issue. You have to feel your way through it." Marcus understood exactly what he meant. For years, he'd tried to talk his way out of his problems. He'd tried to think his way out of them. He'd tried to avoid them altogether. But the only way out was through. The program included job training. Keisha Johnson discovered that Marcus had a real talent for organizing, problem-solving, and managing people. She suggested training him in project management and contractor coordination. You could work in construction management, she explained. The industry is booming, and they need people who can communicate effectively and manage multiple moving parts. Marcus took the course. He got certified, and 4 months into the program, he got his first real job. Not a temporary position, but a career track with a company that had a strong reputation and real growth potential. The salary was modest, but it was more than he'd made in retail. More importantly, it was honest work. Work he was good at. Work he could take pride in. Meanwhile, Marcus was dealing with the other fallout from his life. He had to move out of his apartment because he couldn't afford the rent. The foundation helped him get into transitional housing through one of their partner programs. His new living situation was basic, a small studio in a house with 5 other people also rebuilding their lives, but it was clean, safe, and affordable. Living with other people in recovery meant constant accountability. If Marcus came home drunk, everyone would know. If he started telling lies, his roommates would call him out on it. There was no room for his old patterns. It was uncomfortable. It was honest. It was exactly what he needed. 6 months into the program, Marcus had been sober for 6 months. He had a job he was actually good at. He had a place to live. He had a community of people who understood what he was going through. He had a therapist who was helping him understand the roots of his insecurity and his need to lie. But more than that, he had something he hadn't had in years: self-respect. At the 6-month mark of the program, the foundation held a celebration event. It wasn't as elaborate as the gala had been, but it was significant. The program was celebrating the individuals who'd completed the first 6 months of their transformation. Marcus stood on a small stage, not as the exposed failure he'd been at the gala, but as someone who'd done the work and was seeing results. "I came to the Meridian Gala thinking I was better than this," Marcus said, addressing the room full of program participants, staff, and supporters. "I came thinking that I was still somebody important, that I just needed to fake my way through one night to prove to myself that I was okay. But I wasn't okay. I've been so far from okay for so long that I didn't even remember what okay felt like." He paused, looking around the room. "What I discovered is that okay isn't about the clothes you wear or the job you have or the stories you tell. Okay is about being honest. Okay is about doing the work. Okay is about showing up, day after day, and choosing the truth even when the truth is hard." He continued, "I want to thank Elena Webb, who had the compassion to invite me to that gala even though I'd hurt her. I want to thank her for building this foundation and for believing that people like me could change. And I want to thank everyone in this room who's also doing the work. Your honesty inspires me every single day." The audience applauded, and in the back of the room, Elena stood watching with tears streaming down her face. 1 year after the gala, Marcus was a different person. He'd been promoted to crew leader at his job. He was making a salary that, while not wealthy by any means, was enough for him to move into his own apartment and start building a real life. He had furniture he bought himself. He had a budget. He went to AA meetings twice a week. He attended individual therapy once a week. He volunteered at the foundation 2 evenings a week, mentoring people who were just beginning their transformation. The physical changes were noticeable too. He'd cut back on drinking and then stopped entirely, which meant he'd lost weight and gained energy. His skin looked better. He stood straighter. He smiled more often, and the smiles were genuine. But the biggest change was internal. Marcus had learned to sit with himself, to be honest about who he was, to acknowledge his failures without letting them define him, to understand that his past was real, but it didn't have to be his future. It was during a volunteer session at the foundation that he ran into Elena again. She was meeting with a new donor, but she stopped when she saw him. She excused herself from the meeting and came over to greet him. "Look at you," she said, embracing him warmly. "You're really doing this." "I am," Marcus said, holding her. "I'm actually doing this. Thank you for not giving up on me. Thank you for the gala. Thank you for everything." Elena pulled back to look at him. "I'm so proud of you, Marcus. not as your ex-wife, as someone who believes in the work of transformation and change. You've done the hard thing. You showed up and did the work. Over the next year and a half, Marcus continued to grow. He took additional training courses. He mentored more people. He built genuine friendships, both within and outside of his recovery community. He experienced what it was like to be proud of himself for legitimate reasons. 2 years after the gala, the foundation offered Marcus a full-time position as a program coordinator and mentor. It meant a pay cut from his construction job, but it was work that mattered. It was work that allowed him to use everything he'd learned to help others find their way back. He accepted without hesitation. 5 years after the first gala that changed his life, Marcus stood in the Grandview Hotel once again. But this time, he wasn't here as someone pretending to be somebody he wasn't. He was here as someone the foundation had invited to speak, to share his complete journey from the man who'd shown up in a rented tuxedo telling lies, to the man he'd become. The ballroom looked almost identical to how it had 5 years ago. The chandeliers still sparkled. The orchestra still played. The room was still filled with the city's most influential and wealthy people. But Marcus saw it all differently now. He saw the genuine good being done. He saw the real impact of people who cared about changing the world. The foundation had grown exponentially. What had started as Elena's passion project had become a multi-city operation with dozens of staff members and hundreds of success stories. The foundation now helped thousands of people annually. People dealing with addiction, financial hardship, employment challenges, family trauma, and loss of identity. And tonight, they were celebrating 5 years of transformation. Marcus was seated at the front table with Elena and her husband, David, the surgeon she'd married 2 years earlier. David had been nothing but kind to Marcus, never treating him as a threat or viewing their shared connection to Elena as a problem. In fact, David had become something of a friend to Marcus. He understood what it meant to care deeply about Elena and to support her vision. "You nervous?" David asked, noticing Marcus adjusting his tie. "A little," Marcus admitted. "5 years ago, I was so terrified to be seen in this room. Now I'm about to stand on that stage and tell everyone exactly who I am." "That's growth," David said with a smile. "That's real growth." Elena leaned over and squeezed Marcus's hand. "I'm proud of you," she said simply. "I hope you know that." "I do," Marcus said, "and I'm grateful for everything." When Elena took the stage to introduce Marcus, she told a version of their story. The marriage that didn't work, the pain that followed, the journey toward transformation. But she also told the story from Marcus's perspective, making the audience understand not just that he was a failure who'd been saved, but that he was a human being who'd had the courage to face himself honestly and to do the hard work of change. "5 years ago," Elena said, looking at Marcus, "I didn't know if you would take the chance I was offering, but you did. And now you're helping other people take that same chance. You're the proof that transformation is possible. You're living evidence that rock bottom doesn't have to be the end of the story." Then Marcus took the stage. He told the complete truth. He talked about his drinking, his lying, his desperate need to appear successful while internally falling apart. He talked about the shame that had nearly destroyed him. He talked about the moment he realized that the only way out was through, that he had to stop running and start facing himself. But he also talked about what he'd discovered on the other side of that pain. He talked about the freedom of being honest, the strength that came from vulnerability, the unexpected joy of helping others find their way through darkness, the pride of knowing that his life, which had once felt so meaningless, now had genuine purpose. "I want to speak directly to anyone watching this who is where I was 5 years ago," Marcus said, looking into the camera that was streaming the event live. "You're exhausted from pretending. You're ashamed of who you've become. You think you're too far gone to come back. You think that people like you don't deserve help or second chances." He paused, his voice growing stronger. "I'm here to tell you that all of that is a lie. You're not too far gone. You do deserve help. Second chances are real, and they're available to you right now. You just have to be brave enough to reach for them. You just have to be willing to tell the truth about who you are." Marcus looked directly at Elena. "And you don't have to do it alone. There are people who care. There are organizations that exist specifically to help people like you. You just have to ask. The room erupted in applause, and Marcus felt the weight of everything he'd overcome. The shame, the addiction, the lies, the desperation, transform into something powerful. Purpose. After the gala, Marcus stayed on to speak with people in the crowd. Donors approached him with tears in their eyes, telling him that his story had moved them. Program participants who'd just begun their journeys thanked him for the hope his words had given them. Other staff members at the foundation congratulated him on the power of his testimony. One woman came up to him, a younger woman who looked to be in her late 20s. "I'm Sarah," she said. "I'm a social worker, and I want you to know that your story is exactly what my clients need to hear. I'm going to recommend this speech to everyone I work with." "Thank you," Marcus said. "That means a lot." "No, thank you," Sarah said with intensity. "You're showing people that healing is possible. You're showing them that failure isn't the end of the story. In my field, we see so much hopelessness. To see someone like you standing on that stage, successful and sober and at peace with himself, it changes people." As the evening wound down, Marcus found himself back in the quiet lounge where he and Elena had talked 5 years earlier. This time, he wasn't alone. Elena joined him along with David. "That was incredible," David said, putting his arm around Elena. "You should be so proud of him." "I am," Elena said. "And more importantly, he should be proud of himself." "I am," Marcus said. "I'm not going to lie, 5 years ago, I didn't think I'd be here. I thought I'd be dead or in prison or completely destroyed. The fact that I'm standing here, sober, employed, helping other people, at peace with myself, it's beyond what I could have imagined." Elena smiled. "Do you remember what I told you that first night? That rock bottom isn't the end of your story. It's just a turning point." "I do," Marcus said. "Well, you've turned it into something beautiful," Elena said. "You've taken your pain and transformed it into purpose. That's the kind of legacy that matters." In the years that followed, Marcus continued to work with the foundation. He became the director of the mentorship program, overseeing dozens of mentors who worked with people in recovery. He wrote a book about his journey, From Lies to Truth, A Journey of Redemption, which became a bestseller and helped thousands of people understand that they weren't alone in their struggles. He never married again, but he built a full and meaningful life. He had genuine friendships. He had purpose. He had the satisfaction of knowing that every day, he was helping someone else find their way out of the darkness that had nearly consumed him. Elena and David had children, 2 beautiful kids who would occasionally come to foundation events and see Uncle Marcus, who was always happy to give them hugs and tell them stories about transformation and second chances. The foundation itself grew into a national organization with chapters in 15 major cities. What had started as Elena's passionate response to her failed marriage had become a beacon of hope for thousands of struggling individuals. And it all traced back to one decision: Elena's decision to invite Marcus to that gala. But more importantly, it traced back to Marcus's decision to show up, to be honest, to do the work, to choose a different path even when that path was difficult and scary and uncertain. 10 years after the first gala, Marcus sat in his office at the national headquarters of the Meridian Foundation. On his desk were photographs from his journey. One of him receiving his 5-year sobriety coin, one of him being named program director, one of him at the book signing for his memoir, one of him speaking at a university about recovery and transformation. He was 48 years old now. His life looked nothing like he'd imagined it would when he was struggling in that dead-end retail job. But it looked exactly like what he needed it to look like. His phone buzzed with a notification. It was an email from the foundation's main office. They wanted to stream another anniversary gala event, and they wanted Marcus to speak again. Not as the broken man in the rented tuxedo, but as a living testament to what was possible when someone was willing to face the truth about themselves and do the work to change. Marcus smiled and began drafting his response. But before he sent it, he opened another window and searched for videos of his first speech at the original gala. He watched himself standing on that stage 5 years earlier, sharing his story for the first time in front of hundreds of people. He watched himself explain the journey he'd taken, He watched the impact his words had on the audience. And he felt gratitude. Gratitude for Elena, who had loved him enough to let him go, then cared enough to invite him back. Not to win him back, but to save him. Gratitude for his own courage in accepting help when his pride would have preferred to suffer alone. Gratitude for the thousands of people who'd been touched by his story and who'd found hope in knowing that if Marcus Webb could pull himself out of the depths of despair and shame and addiction, then maybe they could too. He hit send on his response. Yes, I would be honored to speak at this year's gala. 10 years after that first gala, Marcus Webb had one definitive piece of wisdom that he shared with everyone who would listen. Rock bottom is not where your story ends. It's where it begins. The person you are at your lowest point is not the person you have to be forever. You can change. You can transform. You can become someone you're proud of. But it requires 3 things: honesty about where you are, willingness to do the work, and faith that better is possible. If you have those 3 things, you can recover anything you've lost. You can rebuild anything you've destroyed. You can become anything you want to be. The only requirement is that you be brave enough to start. And thousands of people watching the gala streams, people reading his book, people sitting in therapy sessions or support groups, took that wisdom to heart. They made the same choice Marcus had made. They decided to stop running. They decided to stop lying. They decided to face themselves honestly. And they found that rock bottom, while painful, was solid ground. Ground from which they could rebuild. Ground from which they could rise. And that, more than anything else, was the real story of the Meridian Gala. Not that one man was shamed and redeemed, but that countless people found hope, healing, and transformation because one woman had the wisdom to believe in the power of truth, and one man had the courage to finally tell it. Thank you for watching this story. If this narrative touched you, if you've ever struggled with shame, addiction, or the fear that you're too far gone to come back, please know that you're not alone. Help is available. Transformation is possible. And you deserve a second chance. If you haven't already, please subscribe to this channel. We tell stories about real people overcoming impossible odds. We share narratives of redemption, transformation, and hope. Subscribe now so you don't miss a single story. And remember, your story isn't over yet. The best chapters might still be ahead of you.